IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. For a free 7-day trial and for a limited time, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS50. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. A couple of quick announcements because I missed it in the first segment. ITPro.tv's courses now include ITIL Managing the Lifecycle and Microsoft Hello for Business. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. You'd normally pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we have a special offer for our listeners. For a limited time only, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. That's right. You can visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS50 for 50% off.
Wow.
Imagine that.
That's tight.
And we were, well, I'll talk about it next. Conference news, 10th anniversary edition of Source Boston's being held this April, including training sessions on April 24th and the 25th, and conference talks the 26th through the 27th, featuring awesome speakers from the security community. I don't know if they've published the list. I know my talk did get accepted, and I'll be speaking on IoT security, so that should be fun. And I'll take a different angle than I've taken in the past. You definitely want to check that out. Events are going to take place in Boston at the Courtyard Marriott downtown, and Security Week listeners get a $100 off discount on either the training or conference passes when using the discount code Security Weekly. Visit sourceconference.com for more information. We'll be there in the vendor area. I don't know what we'll have because we had some great ideas, but they were kind of late into our conference planning. So we're executing what we can with what we have. There's more stuff coming that will complete our conference schedule. And it's kind of interesting, Michael, here on Startup Security Weekly, I was like, wow, there's like a whole separate like business model for this whole conference thing that we're developing based on putting the investment in both time and money to build it out, which actually wasn't that much, which was good because we're very creative here at Security Weekly. And I was like, wow, we're delivering some great value. You know, we should exploit that. And so, yeah, we've got a great new little strategy for conferences. So it's good.
I liked it. I liked what I saw. I thought it was good. You want to do this some of the articles we pulled? Or you want to talk about our experiences over the last week?
We got a lot of ground to cover, but I really want to talk about InfoSec World.
Let's talk about InfoSec World.
One of the things just related to our announcement, we visited, Michael couldn't make it, but the rest of us, you know, we fell on the sword and drank the free booze and ate the free food and went to itpro.tv studio, which is just simply amazing, Michael, what they're doing in their studio. It is just super, super cool. Great bunch
I'm actually
of people.
bummed I missed it because, again, like the things I geek out on, right? Like economics and then like the gear and how you set up and how you do it. Like that stuff's fascinating to me. I got really overwhelmed this conference, and so I apologize for that.
No worries. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Great folks at itpro.tv. So,
yeah. Well, so I'll tell you one thing. KT's been on one of the other shows, and she's really the conference person that pulls us all together. I really enjoy this show. I admittedly have been in hibernation for the last couple of years, and I come out very begrudgingly. But Paul, the quality of the conversations that we had and the things that we were able to do this week, I left buzzed, like excited with what's going on and where I think our industry is heading. What was your experience like?
No, I certainly did too. I thought it was great. I think my vendor experience, like you mentioned, walking around the floor earlier, I don't know if that was on air or not, but is pretty much the same. Pretty much the same.
It's interesting. So it was right before we came back on, and I just kind of mentioned something to you. So as my business has kind of shifted, right? We talk about Straight Talk. So I was honored that I hosted the Leadership Summit, and we even did some one-to-one strategy sessions. And I have to tell you, I was thoroughly impressed. People showed up. They had 15 minutes. We could talk about anything they wanted. I had people show up. They had ideas written down. They had questions written down. Again, every part of this week was exciting and professional and really cool. And then I spent some time walking the show floor because I work with vendors. I work with startups that are trying to translate their value into what somebody else understands, right? And we incur massive amounts of friction at that. And I thought, well, gosh, here's a chance to go try to understand better. Because the more you and I cover this, the more I know to ask questions about funding. And right, I mean, can look up Owler or Crunchbase on the fly, get some insights around the company and figure it out. And some of the smaller companies still have executive leadership at the show. You get to ask some of those questions. I'll tell you one of the first experiences I had. Now, I don't collect a lot of swag. In fact, I tend to not collect swag. But there was one that had something that looked kind of interesting. I thought either I'd be cool with it or my kids would like it. And so I said, hey, may I have one of these? I'm standing at the thing. The woman is playing on her phone. And she's like, yeah.
I talked about that before.
Yeah, no, Paul, it's like you had just talked about it.
I see the same things, yeah.
She's like, oh, can I just scan you first? And what's crazy is, and I'm not going to name the company, but I had just talked to the CEO of the company the week before. And I actually mentioned that. And she's like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. Here, I scanned your badge, okay. Like, whatever was on her phone was much more exciting than a chance to talk to me. And I admit, I'm probably not much of a buyer for some of these folks, but I'll tell you what then. So I have a new offering. Oh, I'll jump ahead for a second. It's called the Value Prop Audit. And I'm not antagonistic. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that if you were at that show and you want to talk to me about it, no charge. We'll run through the Value Prop Audit. It's 12 points. In fact, Paul, I'll send you a copy of it. Curious your take on it. But I walked up to a number of places and I would ask them, my favorite question, right? What problem are you trying to solve? I would get a lot of blank looks and they'd say, well, but we're and they would just give me a bunch of jargon. And I would say, cool, I don't actually understand what that means. And I had one person where I said, so what's your value prop? And they said, well, no, you can't do value prop in security. And it's funny because Jonathan Sander was standing with me and he said, I think you just said that to the absolute worst person here. Like you picked the wrong guy to say that to. Now, because I'm not a mean person, I actually walked him through. I said, no, I'll help you. And in about 5 minutes, we laid out a very compelling value prop. And so it was just kind of interesting because when we go talk about how all this works, I was shocked. I didn't take enough pictures. I walk up to most booths and I couldn't tell you in the first 30 seconds what they did or didn't do, what problem they solved, and if it might or might not fit me. And so let's just be clear. This matters whether you're a vendor. This matters if you're an investor. In fact, what I've noticed is a lot of investors say, well, it's okay. It's going to take me a little bit more time to understand it. But people that are in the industry, they'll get it right away. No. Nope. Yeah. And what I noticed,
what's interesting too, Michael, is even if like one vendor in particular is like, oh, we solve a lot of problems. They're like, let me walk you through it.
Yep.
I'm patient. That's fine. Yep. You want to take a little more time? I'll give you more of my time so that you can explain it, hoping for a better outcome on the other end. Now, a couple things about this whole interaction. I've learned a ton from you, Michael, on communication. And the vendor area at security conferences is, I think, a shining example of how communication can really be awesome or really break down. So
didn't we have that experience, you and I?
Yeah.
Let's not name names. We're not going to name names.
We did. We had all kinds of different experiences at every vendor's booth that were all like content for the show, really, in communications for startups, right?
And let me point one out in particular. So you and I were comparing notes. It was Wednesday morning, right? So it's the end of the show. People are kind of getting tired or hungover. And you said, oh, have you talked to so-and-so? I'm not naming names. And I said, no, I haven't. You said, you have to go talk to this. You named the person. You said, they have their stuff together. That's where you got to go. She
was my A for the day. I give out. Yeah. I don't know if we can make this a formal thing like across our shows.
We should.
I do. I walk around the vendor area, and there's usually one person that I find, and I don't get a chance to go to every booth. In all fairness, but I usually find one person who is my A for the day that just nails it on like every level, right? You can't get an A for a day if you're not nailing it on every level, right? Like, so you have to be friendly, personable, smart, able to communicate what you do, answer some of my questions that I increasingly get more and more technical until you can't answer them anymore, and I test how you do that as well. Yep. And Camilla was my A for the day. She's awesome. And then it was obvious why.
and so I'm going to get you the value prop audit. You see 12 points, and we're gonna keep working on that together as we go through things. Awesome. So you built up. I said, okay, I'll walk over, and of course she's standing there. Somebody else jumped in and started talking, and you were within earshot and you could hear it. And I heard you walk over to her and say, "You need to work with him, not me." With the guy pitching me. The only reason I stuck around was because I was waiting for her to jump in, and thankfully you walked over and then kind of broke it up, and she jumped in, and I totally saw why she was the A for the day. But it was really fascinating. So here's the thing: a lot of times, and this matters. So let's say you've got a security project and you're trying to pull the team together, and you think, hey, if I keep this broad, I can connect it to anybody. That's something I actually call the perfect message fallacy. The idea is I got enough there that somebody will find something they like. It has the opposite effect. It means nobody gets any value out of it, and they shuffle along as fast as they can. You got a project that's not going the way you expected. That's what happened. And so when you're on the show floor, the single best thing you can do is get razor sharp on the problem you solve and the value you create solving that problem. Communication stuff, we're of course going to evaluate, but if you can get that clear, you've given people a reason to come see you. Not because you're raffling off a gadget, not because you got little tchotchkes that everybody wants. If you can do that, because people are starved for those conversations.
Yes.
And so
but as a startup, Michael,
a lot.
I think the lesson really here for this show, if you're listening because you're either evaluating startups or you're starting your own startup or you've already started a startup and
want to invest in startups,
you have to, or invest in startups, right? But if you're a startup, right, you have to realize that we've talked about this on the show. Other people are going to have to communicate the value of what you do and the problems that you solve. And what I think Michael and I are pointing out is that when we walk the show floor at a security conference, the majority of the people standing in the booths are not able to communicate the problem that they solve, the value that they bring, and what are their differentiators, right? I'm sure all those things are on your list. I know they are because I know you very well. Michael,
let me take you a step further, though, because what we also learned is if I ask this person, I get this answer. I ask this person, I get a totally different answer. So one of the booths actually had somebody from marketing and somebody from sales. I just went, they were really cordial. And I said, so how are you guys doing? Right. So you've been on this side of it. There's what we call an MQL and a SQL, marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead. And I said, so you guys at odds over that? And it's funny because one of them said no, and the other one went, totally, yeah.
The salesperson's probably like, yeah.
That's exactly what that's exactly how it broke down. And so what's interesting though is to your point, that's sometimes I learned a stat this week, and I've only validated it so far, but the average CISO is dealing with 50 or more vendors in their organization right now. So even though I'm going to lament not picking up our heads and looking at what's going around, and by the way, this is why value. What problem are you trying? What are the top 3 problems in your organization today you need to solve? By the way, send us that note. I mean, we'll go find the companies that we think are compelling and the startups that are doing that. That's part of what this program does. So if you're on that side going, yeah, I wonder, let's go figure that out together.
What kills me, Michael, is I walk up to booths that I know what they do. I know what problem they solve because I've covered them on the show. I've evaluated their technology. Sometimes I've been hands-on with their technology, right? And I walk up, and it's not their technology or the company or the founders, right? It's whoever's standing in the booth just can't communicate. And sometimes I try and help them too. I'm like, no, you want to use this as an example. They're like, what was that news item? I'm like, no, you want to use that as an example. That's a great example that people will relate to.
And you and I are different in that we cover this for the space. We're communicators. We spend a lot of time looking at these types of things. But I'll tell you, and so like where you say, I'll give you more time, we're not normal. We will give them more time because it's an opportunity for us to figure it all out.
Yes.
But that's so what you're describing, I call translation friction. And every time you have to go through translation, because I also skipped over, and I want to amplify something else that you said. The people in the booth need to be able to explain that compelling. And by the way, not in contrast, not in dissonance with whatever's on your website and whatever's in your sales materials. And by the way, go check. They're probably in dissonance anyway. But you've got to be able to convey it to them enough that when they get back to the office, if they actually have that problem, they remembered enough of that conversation to go look you up and follow to that next step. So, one of the things I've started asking people is, how's this show for you? Right? I mean, I ask both sides, like if you're an attendee or if you're a sponsor, and I can tell you what, the people on both sides who came in a little bit more prepared and made some investment to it, almost always reported, I got value here. I had these questions answered. I've met these people. It was great. And when you talk to people who just kind of showed up and wung it, wung it. Is that thing? Winged it? Wunged it? What did they do?
Yeah.
Whatever. They wung it.
Yeah.
We're going to say they wung it. They were like, well, we'll see. And so that's the thing. So
I wanted to thank you and Jason Blanchard, because during the course of this year, I spoke with both of you very specifically about a lot of communications topics, right? But very specifically about my talks, what message I was trying to convey, how to convey that message, how to write the CFP, and also how to deliver the talk, right? So I drew knowledge and experience from both of you. I gave my talk, and it was the most popular talk at the conference. And I can only credit much of that to you and Jason, because I listened to what you were saying, and I incorporated that in my talk. And I gave like the most popular talk. I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, wow, that actually, listening to people and implementing their advice has really paid off, because my talk went really well.
And I'm terribly sorry that I missed it, but I'll tell you what else. I've heard a lot of people commenting on it. Let me tell you this. You also inspired somebody else. They said, you know what? I sat in Paul's talk, and that really got the juices flowing. And I realized I have some experiences. So I encouraged them, and I introduced them to KT and said, good, go picture your idea. And then I said, you might not be Paul, but yes. So Paul, you inspired other people to start looking at their own experiences and ways that it can work. So it was good. It was a good experience. I actually hope I can get out to some more shows now. Like, I'm kind of starting to enjoy it a little bit better. I'll tell you, like, if you're there, it would be fun, and we can walk the floor together. And let me just, one last piece. When Paul and I were walking the floor, at no point were we negative to anybody.
No, never.
And we're not out to play tricks. We're not out to hurt anybody. We're part of this industry. So our goal was, let's go ask questions and let's go understand. Right? For me too, I was testing out the value prop audit. I was testing out some of the things I was able to do. I was asking about translation friction. I was asking about leaving deals on the table. I was asking about solving problems.
Like, at different points in the conversation, speaking, like, being honest, they would ask me, like, who are you and where are you from? And then I would tell them, like, yeah, like, I run a podcast network, like, I analyze the industry. I've worked in the industry for 17 years, and I'm very upfront about my experiences and why I'm there. And I'm really here just to learn about your company, kind of thing. And I think the people that ask earlier probably better off, because they're getting to know, like, who your audience is, right? So they're trying to understand who they're talking to by asking. Some of it I think is that. Some of it I think is like, who are you, and like, why are you asking me these questions, kind of thing too.
Well, yeah, because we don't ask standard questions. No. And when it's the two of us standing there, it's like, let's go deep into the tech. And I love that because I love the way that you process that stuff, and I understand it. But then I'll hit them with a use case, like, out of left field, or at least it feels like it to them. Right. And then 30 seconds later, I'm asking about their last funding round, and they're like, wait, I'm sorry, who are you two again? And what are you doing to me?
Well, I mean, funding stuff aside, I think that one of our goals with this show, and certainly when we walk the vendor floor and talk to people, is, like, the reason people ask who we are is because we're asking different questions in a different way than the rest of the attendees. My goal is to bring the attendees to the point where they're asking those same questions. That is my goal. So there's not this big disconnect between, like, hold on, like, this guy Paul and Michael, like, they're just asking so much different questions from everyone else. That shouldn't be the case. I'm going to credit this to you. On the back of my business cards, it now says, what problem are we trying to solve? There you go.
And that's how I presented it to people. I had a number of people stop me on the show floor and during the week and say, hey, I've been using that question when I go meet with the vendors, not to antagonize them, but to try to get it understood. And I get like, hey, that's really helping. Like, I'm getting a better sense of it. And all I would say back is, can you answer the question for yourself? Because that's how you can start to make those connections, and it all really starts to work out. So yeah, Paul, that's, it's funny. That's like the whole idea of this value prop audit thing. And I've got some ideas around how that might work for our program. So you and I can talk about that offline. Yeah. But anybody who's interested, I'm going to make this somewhat public, and I'm going to give people a different way to improve it, with the idea that it makes it better for everybody. So yeah, it was a great experience. I had a lot of blast with it. You want to talk through some of the articles I put up, or
how big is the market for drone catching drones? Like, they're drones that catch other drones, right? I was trying to think, like, what's the addressable market for this technology?
Yeah.
Other than military usage, obviously.
Well, I'll tell you what. My instinct is it's big, actually.
Really? Sporting. I can see sporting events, maybe, was my thought.
I think you're going to find, I mean, like, it's like we've always had those neat, nifty little articles of like, I trained my eagle to go take the drone out, and I train, right? And by the way, I mean, you're seeing people do that. I think it's interesting. Here's what I thought about it. Like, this is essentially crossing into security, meets drones, meets all sorts of other stuff. And if you remember the Super Bowl this year, Intel had all of those drones being able to work as like part of a system, and there's all sorts of nifty things happening right now. And so naturally, that leads to so we have drones. So what's the anti-drone? Because, the way that we're looking at it is going out in your front yard with a shotgun and shooting indiscriminately into the air is bad for a lot of reasons. Legality aside, bad for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. And so what's just kind of interesting is when this came across, so just you asked me what the addressable market is. Airspace is among some 70 companies working on counter-drone systems. So the answer, but think about it. As drones get cheaper and cheaper, I mean, like, you can get high quality, the DJIs and stuff. They're like $1,000. You could buy them at Target. Mm-hmm. So if you can do that, and they've got, like, I mean, they're built with gimbals and really quality lenses on them now. So there's like fantastic footage. That's the new thing. I think it's a very short hop to everybody's got a drone and they're all over the place, and it's becoming this huge nightmarish mess for us. So if you have a place where you want some privacy, I think this is going to be. I think it's going to be a contested area, and I think it's going to be a litigious area. But I thought it was interesting, and that's all I really wanted to point up is that it's because we always look on the one side of it. Yeah. By the way, this does talk about they now have shotgun shells for shooting down drones, and there's one that it's essentially like a taser round that it like hits the drone and then just supercharges it. I'm waiting for the EMP rounds, but then I would like some of those when I'm driving my car too. So
absolutely.
All right, a couple other things I thought were interesting. 5 reasons to slow or stop the growth of your business. Now, typically when we're here, we're talking about growth. We're talking about traction. We're talking about getting to your next round or getting to your next client. And so I just put this in because it was totally different and it was interesting. And I give you the 5 reasons. You need time to achieve your profitability. You've noticed we've started to talk about that more on the program. Mm-hmm. And after listening to James today, I've realized I think we should probably continue to focus on that. As liquidity tightens up, as volatility increases, I'm going to be really curious to watch what happens with the funding rounds. Now, we know in security, there's multi-$100-million funds that just launched. If you've got a compelling idea, good tech, good team, and you can communicate it properly, you've got a really good shot at being successful. But you need to focus on profitability. It talked about some other stuff, though, too, avoidance of regulation. If I stay smaller, I don't have to comply with certain things. It's a real deal. They say wish to maintain sustainable growth. I'm going to go the other side. Some people, we call this the lifestyle business, and we've gotten some feedback that people are interested in that. They kind of want to run their own shows, so they're a startup, but they don't want to be the next unicorn. They don't want to have hundreds of millions of dollars. They want to do some of those things. And so I just wanted to point out there are times where you don't have to regale us with we have 10 quarters of double digit growth, blah blah blah. Yeah. I've always kind of put it like, I don't know if it's a marathon's probably a bad example, but there are some times when you want to sprint. There are times where you may want to walk. There are times you may want to jog, and like knowing when to do all those things is really important for your business. And in this article, nailed that you don't have to be like an 11 out of 10 all the time. That's probably actually not the right strategy for you. I do want to point out in this article, avoidance of regulation. I think that is a thing to slow or stop the growth or expansion of your business. I thought that the 2 examples they had were really bad. Yeah, that's why I kind of just I liked it as a topic and as a headline.
Their examples were just bad. I think a better example we talked about last night, that GDPR regulations in the EU that may preclude some people from doing business there on a probably different levels, but that's a good example where regulation might impact the growth or speed at which you're growing your business. The examples I gave weren't even worth talking about. So we
got to find a startup from the EU who wants to talk about that. So if you're listening and you're located in the EU and you're a startup, reach out and love to have a chat with you about this. So I thought it was interesting. Zapier Zapier or Zapier?
Is it Zapier or Zapier?
Every time I talk to somebody about this, they always say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I think it's whatever.
Well,
anyway,
it would be Zapier, right? Because Zap is like Zap, so it'd be Zapier.
But if you follow the rules, right, it's ZAP, right? So Zapier, wouldn't that be ZAPPIER?
Oh, that's true.
See, this is the thing, right? If we try to be like really clever with our branding, we just confuse everybody on how to say it.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's Zapier, but it could be Zapier because I thought it's about Zaps. So Zapier. Anyway, they're a company. They're kind of like modern day middleware. If you're not familiar with them, most of the things now some company they've gotten wise and they say, okay, well we have an API, or we use webhooks as the other thing, or we've done a Zapier integration. And that allows you to move data between systems on triggers and events. And
we're using that. Awesome. We use them here at Security Weekly for one particular integration. I should use them for more. And really, my goal is not related to this topic, but my goal is I want to take my social media messages from Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and I want the ability to, I don't know, either give my team access to them, which is kind of interesting because what if some of them are personal and I can't control that, right? Because people are friends and they're going to send me a message. But either selectively or just have people have access because that's generating some type of activity that myself and my team needs to work on, right? Whether that's, in our case, right, a lead for a potential sponsor, someone who wants to be a guest on the show, that kind of thing. And Zapier, I think, can help with that problem. Also, we talked about Front before. Front doesn't, from what I can tell, doesn't support LinkedIn. So I don't want to adopt the technology and then be missing like a huge
LinkedIn has basically shut itself off from the rest of the world. You can post stuff to it using Buffer and Hootsuite, right? Yeah. We brought up Hootsuite last week. I actually have an integration working right now with Buffer and If Then which is very similar to Zapier. In fact, like I would say Zapier is more enterprise. If Then That's more personal. There's some crossover between the two. So here's what they did. They said, you know what? We're in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we have no offices, and it's really freaking expensive to live here. So I'll tell you what, if you want to go live anywhere else you want, we'll give you 10 grand. We'll cover your costs of moving and getting anywhere else you want. So I put that up for two reasons. One, I think it's fascinating and frankly, right, because I like this type of stuff. I think it's kind of interesting. This article actually had some pretty good links that I pulled up and some things to look at, like how much. So it said testimonials on sites like Pesa and Indeed suggest that Zapier employees average salaries of $90,000 to $115,000 annually. Guys, that's good money. And then it also has a bit talking about trying to pay for rent. So I don't know if people tend to know this, but the standard industry expectation is you'll pay 28% of your take-home income on your food and housing, or not housing rather, 20%. So they said, it's 30%. And so they actually went and they looked at where you could afford to live in the Bay Area on 30% of those salaries. And the answer is not a lot of places. And so they said, look, this is a problem and we're going to push it. You and I have also showcased stories, not just the Boston, Austin, DC corridors, but the other places that we're starting to see startup cultures thrive. And then on one hand, IBM says, well, we're not doing remote workers anymore. So it's just like one of those, watch this space, because I think we're getting to the place where, let me put it this way. And you and I have had this conversation. There are certain things where you need to be face-to-face. There are certain companies where that absolutely makes sense. And then there are certain functions within the company where, are you getting your job done? Are you good? Cool. And this seems to be one of those cases. I thought it was interesting, and so I shared it. But that said, if you like this kind of stuff, go take a look at the links. Like, this has got some pretty awesome links in it that you can waste some time on a Friday afternoon checking out.
Awesome.
All right, the startup deck thing. I feel like people like it when we put these things in.
Me too.
But now that we just came off of a week, so pitch deck. Typically, as you know, a lot of the advice that's out there, some of it's good, some of it makes me kind of cringe or do a double take. Here's what I liked of this one. It basically said, look, if you're trying to raise capital, you need to do it. And it laid out some do's and don'ts that I really thought was interesting. One of the things is it said, make sure you put your copyright on it, make sure you label it confidential and proprietary. Yeah, there's some discussion in the broader in the world as to whether you need to do that or not. And you know what? I liked it. I think that's a darn good idea. I totally like it. I also like this one. Do send the pitch deck in a PDF format to prospective investors in advance of the meeting. Yeah. It said don't force them to do it from Google Docs, Dropbox, tell them where to get it. Don't give them a barrier. Send it to them. Send it in PDF. Make it easy for them to read. And I think it's really important because think about this. You're not pitching a salesperson. I'm not trying to hook you in. I'm not trying to give a presentation at a conference. I don't have to ride this really cool roller coaster. I know from an investable perspective, they want to understand what problem do you solve, how addressable is the market, what's your ability to define the category, can you be a category king, and essentially how, if I give you money, are you going to be a good steward of that money and earn me the return that I want?
Right. Yeah, it's
there's
the
nothing
content.
secret in that.
Yeah, it's the content that matters.
So letting them review that ahead of time matters.
I think some of the advice was kind of like, yeah, I mean, it should be. I'll have the confidential and copy, all that stuff, right? But the content matters most. I thought this article kind of went a little off the rails as to some of those other details. However, it is important to be very detail oriented when you're creating your pitch deck. So that stuff is important. However, don't let that don't lose focus on your content either.
Now, what I also liked about this, because to your point, so I liked its don'ts. They were good. Basic stuff, good reminders. Had a bunch of links for other people's pitch decks. But then, like in terms of their layout, sure, fine, whatever. Like I didn't want to get hung up on that. Yeah. It was much more of that front-loaded piece to it to say, yeah, there's a couple things here really good to remember to do. There's a few things here you probably don't want to do so much. So last one I put up, fighting analysis paralysis. You and I talk about this a lot. I'll tell you what. Biggest question I got this week, and I promise I will do more as a result of this, and you and I can certainly explore this further for our audience. People asked me, how do I focus? Right? And so you can see some of the Post-it notes over my shoulder where the other ones were. It's Q2. I've got to go recalibrate that, figure it out. And I've been really looking at the systems that I use. Number one thing that I find when I ask people about how they prioritize their time is I get a blank stare and I'm not real good about that. You have to be. If you want to be successful, whether you're a startup or you're running a security company or a security team, you need to be solid on that. And one of the things we find is analysis paralysis. There is so much pressure in the security world today to do something, but don't screw up. But totally do something, but don't screw up. Oh, and P.S., all these other people are depending on you, but don't screw up. Oh, and they don't understand a thing you're saying, but don't screw up. But you do something. And so I find a lot of people they're stuck. They're not sure what to do. They get this analysis paralysis, and they put it there. And it said, beware of your feelings, get trusted feedback. I'm going to take you a step further. And it says this. It says, take a daring steps today. Steps. This is why I always talk about the best next step. If you can quickly clarify your focus, prioritize your effort, take a step. I don't mean march. Take a step. Take a step. See how you feel. See what happened. There's a trick for writing. And there's all sorts of different ways to do it. But basically, if you get started on a task and you give it at least 10 minutes, if you get to the end of the 10 minutes and you haven't gotten anywhere, good, then okay, you're done. But if you have, then keep going. And what you find most times is the paralysis prevents all these things from happening. So just get started. So if you're trying to tackle a project today or whatever else, and it's an important project, go after it. Now, if you're the starter who doesn't seem to finish things, start finishing first. Like don't start new stuff.
Yeah.
But I thought this was a pretty interesting read, and I really like the point of don't get hung up on it. Like don't overthink it. Get some evidence, get some feedback, and then go. Just do something small, repeatable, and then crush it. So I thought that was really kind of cool. In terms of the news for the week, we'll make it quick. Cloudera filed for an IPO. Here's why it's interesting. They got $1 billion in funding. If you go back and you look it over, Intel themselves invested $740 million in 2014. If anybody follows Adam Lashinsky, he covers the space fantastically. He's at Fortune. He does a daily brief on this. But I heard him talking about it on a radio or something, and he basically said Intel has a history of making bad bets. Like basically they bet high and they sell low, and so he's curious to see how Cloudera comes out of this. They have $261 million in annual revenue. They've got over $1 billion in funding. Intel has invested $740 million. So we're going to see where they go. Wal-Mart is launching an investment arm. Here's what's interesting because we've talked about M&A and we've talked about this type of stuff. What they are doing, so I don't know if we talked about this here. Walmart recently bought Jet.com, which is big into e-commerce, and they've actually made 2 other acquisitions since then. So they've got a new venture. It's called Store Number 8. It's going to work with startups that specialize in robotics, which makes sense, virtual augmented reality, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Notice they separated those 2 out, Paul, so maybe they listen to our program. Here's the thing: it's going to be separate from the broader company. So they're really going to be much more of an investment house than an M&A house. Guarantee we're going to watch the stuff that floats up is going to get acquired in. And they're going to be on the leading edge.
Yeah, and they have a track record of doing that, making acquisitions and investments that could potentially make their core business better. And I think they've done that very well.
Yeah. I mean, Amazon, I think, is actually leading proof, too, that there's a lot of stuff you can do there. And then the only thing I wanted to do update with Okta is they priced out at the top of their range. So that's interesting because when we said it before, we said, hey, they didn't price it yet. They filed. If they get it, they're going to be $1.5 billion. That's their value. They priced their launch to be at a value of $1.5 billion. So it's a big deal. We'll see how they perform and where it goes. So other than that, we already, we covered the business cards with you. It was a good hit. Everything else went well. It was a great week, and I look forward to more. And it was always great to see you in person, my friend.
Yes, always great to see you as well. Next time we'll spend more time together. Maybe, I don't know. It's at conferences is kind of funny like that. But we'll be at B-Sides Boston next week, and shortly thereafter we'll be at Source Boston. So that'll be fun, and we're starting to plan for DEF CON, which will be fun. Get in front of 30,000 hackers and information security people. That's always fun as well. So awesome. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching to this episode of Startup Security Weekly. See everyone next time.